sorry about that. I wanted to make sure I had my background there going. But it's great to be here, Andre, and I'm really excited. And I think Brand Innovators as well for the opportunity for myself and for Danone North America. So by way of introduction, again, my name is Terrance Irizarry, and I'm currently the Chief Inclusive Diversity Officer at Danone. By way of how I ended up here, it's a interesting story I'll quickly share with you, but and I also think it's interesting that everyone on the line is going to get to hear from an HR person and kind of how the HR person got into this role. I've heard, and I've been able to jump in on a few of the speakers, and I know the folks that have been here and represented have had DE&I roles, but have been integrated into marketing roles. So my background is a little bit different in that regard, in terms of I came up through human resources. I landed in HR really because it was more of a skill set match. I thought I wanted to do something where I interacted with people, but I also had strong analysis skills. And I thought HR was a good place where I could utilize both of those skills. Fast forward, the company that I interned with, I was ultimately hired by, which was Texaco at the time. And two things happened while I was there. Number one, I started my career in different areas, rotating around, but I ultimately landed in a recruitment role. And I began to notice that all the work I was doing to bring diverse talent in, I was doing a great job of finding diverse talent and making those connections. But I wasn't having an impact on what their experience was like once they got to the company and how long they stayed. And for me, I began to want to impact that side. And that was how I began to explore what I would call workforce diversity today. But the second thing that happened, which is a little bit more impactful on this topic, is that I happened to be at Texaco during the time where they were experiencing, at the time, it was the US's largest discrimination lawsuit. And it was a class action suit filed by African Americans regarding discrimination. And at that point in time, I was actually on the diversity team. So I was leading campus recruitment, but at the time, the function was diversity and campus recruitment, or diversity and recruitment. And I was on that team. And so I was very close to what was happening on the diversity team. And it was kind of all hands on deck. So I got pulled into diversity and got exposure to that area. But more importantly, what I saw that the problem started originally because the senior team there did not understand why Black employees wanted to celebrate Kwanzaa. And that's how the lawsuit began, is that conversation was exposed. And then the OFCCP started digging deeper. And then that's how they uncovered some other things. But the bigger thing is that I was there after the lawsuit. And as part of the lawsuit, there was actions that had to be taken by the company. And I remained at that company for a few years after the lawsuit. And I saw such an amazing transformation of not only the organization, but the environment. And that's the first time for me that I began to connect diversity with not only my own passion, but with the success that a company could have. Although I didn't stay throughout, much longer, and Texaco ultimately became Chevron, I saw the beginning stages of what in infusing diversity and infusing inclusion could do to an environment immediately. And then I wanted to duplicate that throughout my career. And now I'm fortunate enough to be in a role where, my morals match what I do for a living, which is a unique situation to be in, right? I think we all love what we do, but for me, this is just happens to be so aligned with what I would be doing had I not been doing diversity as a profession. So here I am 20 years later of doing diversity work and still loving it.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing, and it's melting my heart. It's reminding me again of why I even chose this path. And Terrance, listen, that story I think resonates on a number of levels with a number of I think our audience members who are tuning in today, because it's important to have that passion. But then when you work with an organization who who does it because they want to do it and not because they have to do it. I think it begins that conversation of permeating it
Right.
throughout your entire culture. In which one of the things about Danone that I saw that piqued my interest was the core values for the company. Humanism is one of them. And I wanted to share this with the audience just in case you didn't have a chance to go to the website and check this out. But here's what Danone talks about when they mention humanism. It calls for sharing responsibility and respect for others, attention to individuals, whether they're consumers, colleagues, or fellow citizens, and is at the heart of our decisions. And on this topic of connecting with the LGBTQ plus community, I was curious from your point of view, why is the value of humanism important to this particular topic?
Sure, and thank you for pointing that out because I really think it's important. What you mentioned is humanism is a part of our overall value system.
Hmm.
So the entire piece is called hope, and the H
Mm,
stands for humanism.
hmm.
The O is for openness, the P is for proximity, and the E is for enthusiasm. But the humanism piece is so important because it's at the core of where we all start. It's at the core of who
Mm,
we all are. So from our
hmm.
perspective, being a public benefit company, right, as some of you may know, Danone North America is a PBC, public benefit company. So that clearly states that we have a dual purpose of helping society as well as our stakeholders, whether that be shareholders or consumers or clients in this
Hmm.
case. So that humanism that you're talking about, we believe is at the core of our business, right? In terms
Hmm.
of the way we treat our employees, the way we treat consumers, the way that we operate in our environment, the way we treat the climate, um, the way we give back. All
Mm,
those things we believe are part of the for lack of a better term ecosystem, right? Because all
yeah.
those folks that we're touching are either potential candidates or current or potential consumers,
Mm,
right? So if we base our interactions with individuals on the fact of that these are folks that we care about from different angles, then you can go from there to say, how would we treat people and how would we communicate to people that we care about, right?
mm,
Whether or
hmm.
not they are a current candidate, a consumer, those things are just at the basic human level. How do we treat people? And then that is the basis for everything else that we do at Danone, in
Hmm.
terms of the way that we everything from our supply chain in our products to the way that we package our products to how we interact with our consumers is based
Hmm.
on the fact of that we're all humans and that we care about each other and that we want to
Hmm.
treat you with a certain level of respect that is
Yeah.
owed to all of us as
Yeah.
individuals. And that's where we start, and that's what our business is based on.
Man, okay, so this is kicking it off to a whole nother level. All right. So okay, so you can't talk about humanism unless you talk about making a connection. So I'm curious. It sounds like the noun is committed. Obviously, I hear the passion in your voice. And I know people out there saying, yeah, it may not be humanism, but yeah, it's a part of our values as well. So, Terrance, help it become real for all of us. What are some of the things that the noun does to create that connection with the LGBT community? And listen, talk about it inside out. What are you doing internally, but also what are you doing externally?
Great. No, and that's really important, right?
Hmm.
Because before before like at Danone, we really believe that, right, you have to be able to take care of your house, as they say, before you go outside, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I'll start with internally. And what we wanted to do and what we're currently still doing is always making sure that we treat our employees and that we have an environment that demonstrates our commitment to diversity. So
Hmm.
in that regard, one of the things that we do, for instance, is that we make sure that we have policies, benefits, and programs that support a diverse community, including the LGBTQ community. So, for
Hmm.
instance, we're proud that we've won the Corporate Equality Index Award and scored 100 on that survey 3 years in a row now. but for us, it's not just about the award. It's that award recognizes that we have an environment that matches what we say in terms of our commitment, right?
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
CEI index measures what are your policies and who are they offered to, and what's the differences in terms of how you offer them. What
Mhm.
about your environment? What about your training? Where do you recruit from? So for us, we want to make sure that we have those internal kind of commitments and demonstrations really
Mhm.
strong, so that our employees feel good about what we're doing. They know we're committed to it, because they're going to be important in how we go to the next level, which is to go external and to
Mm.
begin to talk to, whether it's our various stakeholders or consumers or those types of things. And
Mhm.
really, external, what we want to do to really engage and demonstrate that is support the LGBT community, as we started out by saying, humanism, right?
Mhm.
So for us, this is not just about selling product, right? We want to interact with the LGBT community in meaningful ways. So the first way
Yeah.
that we've been able to do that is we've connected with our internal employee resource group that we call Pride.
Okay.
And we have hundreds of employees. By the way, we have corporate offices and manufacturing locations, and we have members of this ERG from both our manufacturing locations and corporate offices. And we engage with them to say, what is it that you care about? What is it that we should be advocating for, using our voice for? How can we help make a difference and impact this community in a positive way? So
Yeah.
we feel really good that this ERG has been playing a vital role in directing where we put our energy, where we put our focus, and making sure that we're doing things that are not only authentic, obviously, but that really have an impact. So, for
Mm.
instance, we advocate externally for laws, legislation, and things that we care about,
Mm.
right? Because
Mhm.
as large size companies that I know you've heard from and everyone has heard from throughout the day today, we have a huge platform and we have a huge voice. So how
Yeah.
do we use that to speak up and to
Mhm.
advocate for the LGBT community? Because that community, again, is our employees. It's the families of our employees. It's the people that live in the communities around our facilities. It's our
Yeah.
consumers. So for us, we kind of think of it as that's us, like that's
Yeah.
all of us. So what is it that we speak up for? So by way of example, for instance, we've spoken up around not only pro LGBT legislation, but
Mhm.
we've spoken up against anti-LGBTQ legislation, right?
Wow.
So
Right.
unfortunately, this year we've hit a milestone in terms of the amount of anti-LGBT legislation that has been passing through the states. So
Right.
for instance, Danone, whether it's through our own organization or through our relationship with the Sustainable Food Alliance,
Okay.
um, we have spoken up and supported legislation. So for instance, we spoke up for transgender protection, specifically in Virginia. We've
Wow.
spoken up for LGBT protection in both Utah and Tennessee. So not just on a
Wow.
national level, but on state levels, right? I
Right.
just got a call from one of our folks that said that we're trying to get back to in person like everyone else. And we're, we're
So
planning
soon.
a,
So soon.
exactly. Soon, we're planning a conference in person, and we were talking about the states that in which we want to hold our conference.
Yeah.
And they came to our team for advice on that based on some of the legislative work that we've been doing. That's
Right.
powerful to me. The other thing that we've done lastly is as an example, is that we made a huge kind of mark, if you will, in terms of participating in an op-ed around transgender rights that was in USA Today back in
Okay.
April. And we did that with our partners in the Sustainable Food Policy Alliance, and that was with
Mhm.
um, Mars Unilever and Nestle. And it
Okay.
really just spoke about to say that we denounce all these anti-LGBT legislative laws going out.
Mhm.
So I bring all these things up as examples in terms of the way we're connecting, is because for us, and I was on a little early, so I saw what Nikki did and I saw the commercial. So for us, we're trying to do that simultaneously in terms of build and demonstrate our support,
Hmm.
as well as then be able to take proactive measures in terms of marketing to the LGBTQ plus community. But before we do
Hmm.
that, we need to show real commitment, real authenticity, and real action in terms of the work that we're doing
Yeah.
before we can start going in and start trying to, talk about our products, because that's what's important to us. And we believe if we do that correctly, and studies show that our products and what we're doing, those things will happen. But we really
Yeah.
believe in the good work that we're doing, and we try to engage our employees both internally and externally to do that work.
That's you're dropping gems right now, because that's, first of all, that's amazing. I'm hearing themes around making sure that people have a seat at the table. Um, Nikki from City, let's reference her. We're talking about Citigroup. If it's about us, or nothing about us without us, right? That
Right,
term was used. Bring
right.
me to the table. Include someone or a group of individuals who are true voices of the community to help influence not only the right message and the right tone. And so I want to take you a little bit deeper then, because I know there's a lot of people listening right now. They have those same hopes, aspirations, and dreams about implementing these types of programs and processes, whether they're large organizations, small organizations, agencies, it doesn't matter. But they know that the challenge is real. They know that they've had substantive conversations with primary or key stakeholders internally. Terrance, take me inside. What is it like having these types of conversations to either influence or convince some key stakeholders within and across the noun to support these initiatives?
Oh, that's a really great question. So first, I will start with mentioning the fact of that at at Danone, we recently, maybe now we're about a year and a half to 2 years in, but maybe about a year and a half, that we started what we're calling a multicultural marketing council, if you will. And I'm
Hmm.
excited about that because, to your point about having a seat at the table, this is a
Hmm.
body of folks that consist of brand managers, but we've also integrated our ERG leadership, or some of you call them business resource groups, affinity groups, employee
Hmm.
networks, but we've integrated our leaders of those groups into this council. And what they do is exactly what you said, is they provide that direct input into our
Hmm.
campaigns, our imagery, our
Hmm.
creative,
Hmm.
anything that we're doing. We get eyes on it from people that are part of that community. So we
Yeah.
value that. Like, and let me be very direct. Could other people that are not from that community give valuable input? Of course.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like having someone who lives and breathes and is part of that community give you authentic and real feedback. And that's what we've tried to do through this initiative of having folks from our ERG sit on this council. The one thing I'll say about that before I move on is I know a lot of folks out there have heard, especially, as we deal with racial injustice, you've heard these advice around, engaging people of
Hmm.
color or engaging diverse groups to help do work. And, it's not their job to educate everyone. And I fully appreciate and get that. But I do think that I would urge you to say that there's value in asking some folks that, because there are people that get it and they care about it and they're willing to do some extra work to get you started. I don't see our council as the end all be all, but I do
Hmm.
see it as some of the people that are participating in
Yeah.
founding this type of method.
Hmm.
So moving from that into kind of the convincing relationships or convincing people about it, I will share two things. One is that, and I should have mentioned it on my intro, is that I'm a diversity professional, that I really do believe in the inclusive piece and the inclusivity, but for me,
Hmm.
that's table stakes. I believe in creating an employer of choice and creating an environment of inclusion. So don't get what I'm about to say wrong, but I really, really, truly believe in the impact this work has on our business.
Mm.
And that's probably because I believe that, diversity and being a good person to me is table stakes, right? Like,
Yeah.
like I expect that from you. I expect that from myself. I expect that from my friends and family and my colleagues, to be a good person.
Yeah.
But I do think that making the business connections and demonstrating that is important. And not only is it important, but that's how you'll get people's attention. So
Yeah.
for me, in terms of getting that support and buy-in, one example I'll share directly with this group right now is that originally a couple of years ago when I joined Danone, we participated in several Pride initiatives, right, including the Pride March in Colorado and the Pride March in New York City. And
Hmm.
when I arrived at Danone, the Pride March in my company was situated more as like an ERG community event. And
Okay.
I immediately got involved and shifted that view to more of a marketing business related event.
Come
And there
on.
was definitely some, there was definitely some moaning and groaning about it because we didn't want to lose the community aspect.
Yeah.
But I say that to say is that in terms of getting the support and buy-in, I was able to demonstrate that there are business connections to be made in terms of the amount of marketing opportunities we're going to have, the amount of impressions we'll get, the amount of sponsorship opportunities. So being
Hmm.
able to quantify the impact that these relationships has is always going to get you more support in the future. And then what I would say is that some of that, what I would call inclusivity pieces, that will
Yeah.
come along with it, right? So I'm
Yeah.
all about meeting people where they are. And if you
Right.
meet people that are in the business that are really just saying, look, diversity, I'm all about it, but maybe they're not as into like the individual kind of what I would call like the moral things to do. They get that
Hmm.
part, but that's
Yeah.
not what drives them. Maybe it's the business connection. Show
Yeah.
them, for instance, that the LGBT community's buying power, first of all, globally, is one of the largest, being at something like 1.7 trillion, is
Right.
bigger than the economy of Russia. But just being $1 trillion in the US, if that alone is huge, but if you combine that with the intersectionality, again, it's bigger than the GDP of the UK. So
Hmm.
we could get to that, the inclusivity and around how it makes our workplace a better place. That's
Right.
always important. But I think you get people's attention by demonstrating the business connections that and the profitability that this can drive, and that this is a community that we just need to speak to more directly.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm smiling because it's you living in my headspace right now. I mean, listen, it's and this is an important part because I hear a lot and I read a lot about the pains and the struggles that chief diversity officers and VPs or DNI leaders have in
Right.
regards to doing the work. And to your point, listen, internal community engagement, I think, is important. And I think it's very valuable. It builds engagement, it builds employee satisfaction, whether you're tracking NPS or any other indices. But here's the difference, right? The difference is when you treat your people well through this community type engagement internally, those people are still the fabric of the communities that they represent outside of the workplace.
That's
They
right.
do not transition into other things when they cross,
Right.
or other
Right.
communities, I should say, when they cross over the threshold. So your business case is important, is what I'm hearing you say. Find the relationship, draw the narrative, create the narrative between the work you're doing internally, its connection to the business community or communities externally, and then make your value proposition because it's a
That's right.
dual purpose, right? That's what I'm hearing you say. And listen, we know it's not easy. And we know that there are plenty of opportunities. Throughout today, a lot of our speakers have talked from either an agency or a brand perspective regarding inclusivity and diverse marketing. What do you see as the biggest opportunity to improve in either marketing effectiveness or relationship building across the LGBTQIA plus community?
Sure. I first of all, I definitely see the biggest opportunity is um, something I heard mentioned as well in the last discussion, which is implementing these types of strategies outside of June, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah.
cannot be limited to Pride Month. This should be an all year round part of your business strategy type of
Hmm.
activity.
Right.
And that's important because if as a brand, if you only show up once a year, no one's believing you. There's
Mm,
no demonstrated commitment there, right? You
yeah,
can't show up once a year and think that that is going to buy you equity, if you will, within the LGBT community or any other diverse community. So that's number one.
yeah.
I would say the other opportunity is to, for us, something that we're engaged in right now is to demonstrate your commitment to the LGBTQ community in different ways. For instance, through your supplier diversity initiative. So one
Mm,
of the things that we're doing is we've made a commitment to increase our spend with diverse suppliers. And within that definition, we definitely include LGBTQ owned businesses. So it's
yeah,
not enough to say, yes, I recruit, like we go to Reaching Out MBA, that's great. Yes, we have relationships with community organizations. But I think a really important piece is that we're creating wealth in those communities, because creating wealth in the LGBT community is not just creating community wealth for that community or for them as individuals, but you're
yeah,
creating economic wealth in your local communities where you live and where you work. And that's
yeah,
only making not only our business better, your neighborhood better, but ultimately it's going to create income so those folks can be more clients or customers or whatever it is that your business does. So I
hmm,
think the opportunities really are in some of these, what I would call kind of nuanced areas, if you will, around supplier diversity and creating wealth. And in regard to creating wealth, really quickly, lastly, what I'll say is, and that goes into in your marketing campaigns, not just how they show up in front of camera, but also
hmm,
who's doing the creative, who is the director, what is
mm,
the agency you're hiring.
mm.
All those things are important. And I believe that's where the opportunity is.
Come on, you talking about building a team. That's
That's
what you're doing.
right. That's
You're
right.
talking about building the team, because that is the biggest opportunity, Terrence. And you can't miss this topic when we talk about connecting to the LGBTA community. It's an inside out approach, because you have to first start taking a look at your own internal talent ecosystem.
Yeah.
Are you making sure that your organization, your workforce is representative of not just the communities that you serve or the businesses that you serve, but the communities that you operate in, right?
That's right.
That is, so you
That's
have
right.
to look at that entire ecosystem. Who are we bringing in? How are we bringing them in? And what are we doing to set them up with success? And then connecting to your values, right? Which is, we started our conversation at the top
That's
with
right.
humanism, a part of your whole value system. But then you have to make it real for them. You have to give people a seat at the table, let them know that their voice authentically is being heard and is being leveraged in a way to create excellence through the work that you're doing as an organization. And I want to get personal with you for a second here. I mean, obviously, we know that diversity is important to Danone, but talk to us. Why is this really important to you as a person, Terrence?
Sure. No, and that's a really great question. One of the things that I say to our employees sometimes when we're talking and having really candid conversation is that you have an advocate in me. And
Yeah.
I say that because, look, as a person of color, as an African American man, like I've dealt with feeling whether it's marginalized or left out or not included. I know what that feels like. So just
Hmm.
from that level, because I know that, I will do everything I can not to let that happen to you, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just in my genes, is I know how that feels and it's not a good feeling. And I don't want
Yeah.
people to feel that way. But
Hmm.
the other piece to this is that I truly believe in my heart, like I started out with saying, is that a world in which everyone is part of it and everyone is contributing is just
Hmm.
better.
Yeah.
It's just you're gonna be more productive, you're gonna
Hmm.
accomplish more, all those things, creativity and innovation, like we've all heard, but it's just much
Yeah.
more fun.
Yeah.
That's what it is for me, is it's just so much more fun to be
Yeah.
around different people with different experiences, because when you do come together and create something, it feels that much better that you
Yeah.
did it. And for me, I live this life. Like I live
Hmm.
it. Like
Mm.
I went to a small Catholic school where I was one of 4 people of color out of 150. And then I went to a historically Black college, Morgan State University, for those listening.
Come on.
And that's right. Where it was the opposite, where I was part of the majority. So I've lived that on both sides, and now I'm in a position where, now that I know how both of that sides kind of feel, I want to
Yeah.
create something that I know it feel good for everybody, because that's just a better experience. And that's why this is important to me.
Wow. Oh, listen, I don't know who and how many of you out there are listening to us, and whoever is going to listen to a playback of this, I hope you felt that, because we all have different experiences and we all have different walks, not only into this career, but also we all have different walks when we're trying to pursue our passions in life. And listen, what Terrance just shared is important, because that's his why. And the question is, what is your why? Personally, I have my great days. My great days at work are when I sit back and I see the fruits of that labor. And I'm not smiling because it's like, yeah, we did it. I smile because, in spite of, we did it, or in spite of, we were able to accomplish these initiatives, the goals, assert these projects, and have successful trainings. And it's the tough times that really make the great times that you experience really all worthwhile. And so,
Right.
Terrance, we're going to be taking questions here shortly. Please enter your questions into the chat window, send it to us, because we're going to open it up. No questions off the table. But I'm pretty confident, Terrance, you've either just inspired or you've motivated someone out there to take action. You've just given them hope that there are some small things and some great things that they could accomplish in their role to connect with the LGBTQ community. What advice can you give to them in order to stay focused and keep going?
No, great. And I really do hope that some folks listening today, hopefully you got some ideas, you got inspired, some of those things. But I would say, just in terms of advice, what I would offer is, first of all, this is hard work. So the work you're doing, if you ever feel drained, you ever feel like, man, this is hard, I'm here to tell you that this is hard work. That's number one. But number two, what I would say is, the best advice I can give you is be thoughtful and authentic about how you're speaking to not only the LGBTQ plus community, but to all diverse communities. And what I mean by that is, I'm gonna say something probably that's controversial again, which is, don't rush to jump out there and be the first to make a statement, or the first to say something, because you may not have earned that credibility, and it could do more harm than good. Or
Mhm.
you may not have all the information, right? It was
Mhm.
like early on in the Black Lives Matter movement, everybody wanted to post, on Tuesday, black boxes. And then Black Lives Matter came out and it's like, no, don't hashtag us, because you're clogging up our feed, right? And then
Yeah.
companies were backpedaling, right? So I would say you have to be authentic. And if sometimes that means that you can't get into that conversation, don't. I
Yeah.
would say it's better to be thoughtful and authentic. And what I mean by that is, it's okay to say that either we're listening and we're learning and we're committed to taking action, or that we just don't know. We don't have
Yeah.
the answers, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. So I'll leave you with
Um,
that.
wow, that's amazing. And I see Andrew's on the screen. And listen, you all, I really hope you enjoyed this session, because whether you're an agency, or whether you're a brand that's looking to create stronger connections, always remember that you influence what people see, think, and what they believe. And with that power also comes a burden. I see that there's one question that comes in. Has there been any thought to how diversity shows up from an audible perspective versus only from a visual perspective? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a good question. I saw it as well, and it's not something that we ventured in so far.
Hmm.
Definitely, I've seen campaigns before they went out, and I could recognize the voice in certain cases, and that was a
Yeah.
positive thing. But it's a good point that I think that I will take back. So I learned something from this session that I think it's a good question, and I'm not sure that that's something that's on our radar, but it should be. So thank you for the question. Unfortunately, not a lot to add there.
Okay. All right. No, that's really good. Any other questions? We're going once. We're going twice. Andrew, we're
Well,
gonna
I
leave it in
have
your
one
hands. Go
real
for it.
quick for both of you, really, because I've been nodding vigorously throughout your discussion because you both made such tremendous points, and I think, yeah, what I loved what your refrain, Terrance, that companies standing up for the LGBTQ plus employees is table stakes, right? I hear similar things when I talk to what an HRC score actually means to a company. Like, to me, like someone
Right.
literally said to me, that's the floor, not the ceiling. Like,
Right.
that should be, 100 should be what everyone strives for. But then what do you do with that? So I guess my question for both of you is, what do you do with that? How do you make sure that LGBTQ creatives not just have a seat at the table, but a voice? Maybe that's one way you amplify that.
So one thing I would say is that one of the things that we've done is that through our employee resource group, we allow a lot of input via our employee resource group, and they drive kind of what we do. So for this year's, for instance, for Pride, one of the initiatives that they asked the diversity function to help partner with them on was the use of pronouns within our organization, but not just the use, but we did a really strong campaign about what they mean. We brought in someone who was non-binary to talk about what using the pronouns means for that person and why it means so much. And we put all shape all around it. So I would say to your question is, we now have that vehicle to get that direct input to say, yeah, that 100 on the HRC is great, but how do we make sure that we're bringing that to life, right? And standing behind it. And one of those things is something like pronouns. The other thing I would say is that when we give, like we gave a donation to True Colors of about 100K. When we give our donations to organizations, we always want to partner and know exactly what they're doing. We just don't write checks. Like, we want to know, how can we partner with you to use these funds to make a difference? And in all of the donations that we've done around the LGBTQ plus community, we've done that. And I feel really good about that.
Yeah. And Andrew, I think it's pretty important that organizations focus on the education, because listening is one thing, but knowing what you're listening for is another thing. So one of the things we did here at Jellyfish was rolled out a commitment to using an inclusive language. That was our way of amplifying everything that Terrance just said, but also providing that accent to, okay, here's language that you're looking for, and educating you on how to be observant, so that way you can play whatever role that you're playing. The other thing that I think organizations should do is make sure that they look for opportunities to embed that voice within their creative planning process, because oftentimes you're late in the process and you might hear it, through feedback from your client, or because of some other legal or otherwise implications. So get it closer to your process, bring that voice as part of the process, and then you will avoid some of those missteps that might happen throughout the creative planning process.
Yeah.
And I see, I don't know, hopefully we have time for it. I see there's another question here. What advice would you give Terrance to bring along folks who don't see it, especially in the inclusivity piece? How does or how are you able to win over people with different views?
So I know we're at time. What I would say is that what I say is, like, I practice a method that I'll call the 3 H's, right? The head, the heart, and the hands.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you may have heard this before. You may have heard it in different uses, but what I say is that each person, each organization has a different point that you need to get. Some people, it's the head. I need to give them what I was telling you about spending power, brand loyalty, all those things, and that's how you get to them. Some people, it's the heart around the inclusivity. I need to talk to you about, the fact of, if I'm an LGBTQ, the fact of that 40% of people that utilize shelters are LGBTQ plus. right? Why is there so much homelessness among LGBTQ youth, right? Or if I say that, you know, for instance, like people are bullied and don't get to enjoy their high school experience. So, you know, here in New York, we have, whether it's Hendrick Martin or some of the other schools that were created in that regard. So for some people, for me to let you know that there's people out there that don't feel included, that's enough that they get it in their heart and they're gonna take action. So what I would say, and then the hands is, what do you do with that? Like, how do I take action, right? So what I would say as advice is you have to figure out each person. You can't apply like a one size fits all approach. It has to be, do I need to get to your head or do I need to get to your heart, and then go after it?
Beautifully said, both of you. I think that's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you, everyone who've tuned in today. This has been such an inspiring day of thoughtful conversations, and a fantastic note to end with Terrance and Andre. We hope you can all join us tomorrow for our next Brand Innovators livecast, where we'll be celebrating our latest Influencer Marketing Summit starting at 12 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be joined by marketing leaders from Lulu's, Liquid Death, Remax, Shea Moisture, Unilever, and many, many more. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.